One of my favorite movie series of all time is the series Lord of the Rings by director Peter Jackson. One thing about the Lord of the Rings is that, as you all know, it was a movie series that was based off of a book property of the same name. Lord of the Rings. It was a trilogy of books. Before I saw the movie, years before the movie ever came out, I read the three books and I really liked the books also. But I was just thinking, what did I like the best? Did I like the books better than the movie or the movie better than the books? In this next series, I'm going to take properties like that where there have been a movie that I've seen or a TV series that I've seen that I've also read the books beforehand, and I'm going to talk about the differences between the movies and the books and what I like best about both and which did I prefer. The first movie in this series is going to be Lord of the Rings, and I'll talk about that right after the intro. Welcome back to DLJonesBooks. In this episode, I'm going to talk about versus books versus movies, books versus TV. I'm going to do a series of these videos. With the first one, I'm going to talk about one of my most favorite movies of all times, and that's the Lord of the Rings series, the three movies. The Lord of the Rings is a book series. I read the book first before I saw the movie, of course. But the Lord of the Rings is a book that I really, really enjoyed. One thing I really liked about the book is how when I read the book, so much of what was going on in the book, the characters, the environments, all of that kind of stuff, it kind of just like filled my mind where I can actually see those things when I was reading them. Like just from reading from the beginning, I can imagine what the Shire looked like. I can imagine what hobbits look like. I kind of could imagine what Frodo and Aragorn and Gandalf and all of those characters, everything just filled my mind so clearly. I had a clear vision of what those characters look like and what those environments look like. Everything about that book it just completely captured my mind. And not to mention that, I like to play video games too. Back then, I played a lot more than I do now. And I like role-playing games. And one thing about the Lord of the Rings books, when you read those books, which I read Lord of the Rings, I read the three books after I have been in the video games for years and years. So reading those books, it made me realize how much of like role-playing games and fantasy came from Lord of the Rings, came from Tolkien. And it was just something that just really captured my mind. So when I first heard that they were going to release movies based on the books, I was all in. So I went to see the movies, and one thing about the movie right off the bat that the movie got right completely for me is the look. Now, before I go any further, I'm gonna let you know that if you haven't seen the movies or read the books or did one or the other and you're worried about being spoiled, this is not the video to watch. The stuff I'm going to talk about is spoilers. And the stuff that I'm talking about is assuming that you've either seen one or the other and don't care about being spoiled about whichever one you didn't see. Let you know about that up front before we get started. So what I was saying was that when the movie starts, it starts off with a montage giving you a brief overview of the history up until where the movie is going to begin. Of course, it wasn't really that interesting. It gives you enough information that sets the tone for the movie. It lets you know what state that world, Middle Earth, is in. And it wasn't anything special about that part to me. I was just like, yeah, okay, let's go. But then once you get to the beginning where you're in the Shire and you see the hobbits running around and you see Gandalf on the cart, it got me. Because everything I imagined from when I read the book was actually right there on screen, and it was there just as I imagined it. It's funny how they got, for me at least, I know it may be different for others, but for me, the images I had in my head from reading that book was what they showed me on the screen when I went and saw the movie the first time. Now, in general, for the most part, I feel like they pretty much got the movie pretty close to the book. There were some changes, there were some things left out, but for the most part, I was satisfied with what I saw on the screen versus what I read in the book. I didn't feel like there was anything that was really distracting. Well, there's one, and I'll get to that. I'm going to go over some of the things I noticed that were different from the movie and the book. And, if you didn't notice these things, if you've never read the book and you saw the movie, some of these things may be interesting to know about, to know how it was changed when it was shown on the screen versus what you read if you read the book. And for people who read the book and never saw the movie, I can't imagine that ever being the case. But for those people, you can see what things are different. And you never know, the changes that were made for the movie may be enough to make you say, okay, I've waited long enough. It's time for me to see the movie. Don't know why you haven't seen it yet, but that's where I am with that. Okay, so I got a list of things here. I had to make a list because it was so much stuff I couldn't completely remember all of it. So right off the bat, Frodo in the movies, he was kind of portrayed as a young hobbit. He wasn't a child, but he wasn't he was like a hobbit that was still coming of age and everything. And he was kind of a young hobbit, and all of his friends were like young. I would guess that they would be like teenagers, In the book, however, Frodo was an adult. Frodo was a grown hobbit. He was a grown man, And that was just one change. I don't think it was a big change, just a minor change, but that was something that I noticed right off the bat. Another thing that was kind of different is that in the movie, Sam was kind of like Frodo's best friend. All throughout the movie, he kind of catered to Frodo some, a little bit, but their interaction with each other was more like a best friend type interaction, In the books, Sam was pretty much Frodo's servant. He was his gardener, and they had kind of like a master servant kind of relationship. He called him Mr. Frodo. He did that in the movies too, but their relationship was a little bit different. It was less like we're good friends, we grew up together type relationship, and more of a, I've worked for you all my life type of relationship. What do you need? What do you need now, sir? And all of that kind of stuff, So that was a little bit of a difference between their relationship. Again, it wasn't anything that I thought was distracting. Actually, I kind of like it better how it is in the movies. I like the idea of Sam and Frodo just having this friendship, more so than the idea of Sam, just being a loyal servant, which he was that too, but the movies focused a lot more on them being friends than more so than him being I don't even think they mentioned that Sam was Frodo's gardener until towards the end of this. I don't know if it was the end of the movie, the first movie, or maybe it wasn't even till the end of the whole series. I don't even think they even mentioned anything about Sam being a gardener there in the beginning when they was building those two characters together, building them up throughout the film. Another thing that changed, another small minor thing, when in the movies, when Frodo, Merry, Pippin, and Sam, in the movies, when they first leave the Shire, they first decide they need to go on this trip. They spoke to Gandalf. Well, Frodo spoke to Gandalf, and Gandalf sends Frodo on this journey, and Frodo prepares to leave. In the movie, Frodo is about to leave, and then Sam shows up, and he's like, "You're not going anywhere with me." So it's Frodo and Sam, and they're about to leave, and then just before they leave the Shire, Pippin and Merry just shows up again, and then they kind of include themselves on the trip, and then all four of them go. Kind of made like they were just friends that knew that each other was. They were just friends that knew that something was going on, and they just crashed each other's plans, and because they were friends, they went together. In the book, it went down a little bit different. So Frodo knew he had to leave, so he was preparing to leave and everything. But Sam, Pippin, and Merry, and it was another guy. It was I think his name was Fatty Bolger. And Fatty Bolger was in the movies, but I don't think he had a big role. Now that I'm thinking about it, I can't remember him other than I think he was in the movies, but I don't think he had a big role. But in the books, which, it's been a long time since I read the books, but in the books, it seems like I remember that it was 5 hobbits, not 4. In the movies, it seemed like it was always 4 hobbits: Frodo, Pippin, Merry, and Sam. But in the book, at the beginning, it seemed like it started off as the group was 5. It was Frodo, Pippin, Merry, Sam, and Fatty Bolger. So in the book, what happens is Frodo is preparing to leave. He's told he has to take the ring and he's preparing to leave the Shire. And the other 4 hobbits found out, and they come up with a plan to where they kind of convince Frodo to not being able to leave alone, that he had to take them with him. From what I'm remembering, it seemed like they had to do it without people knowing that what they're about to do. So they kind of had to like sneak out the Shire and leave like without anyone else knowing that they are about to go on this mission. So what happens is they convince Frodo that he can't go alone, and Pippin, Sam, and Merry goes with him, and Fatty Bolger stays behind. And what he does when he stays behind is to keep up everything that's going on in the Shire to try to make it look like Frodo is still there. And I can't remember how successful that was, or even if that was something that was brought up any further past this point in the books. But what ended up happening, they still end up together. The same people, the same hobbits still end up together, and the same hobbits end up going out. The way they came together and the way they decided to go out and stuff, dealing with that, with the whole nature of them leaving the Shire, that was a little bit different in the books. Did it matter one way or another? No. I believe they probably just did it the way they did it in the movies because it was just simpler. You didn't necessarily need to have the conspiracy or anything like that associated with Frodo leaving. You already had the mission, so you just wanted to get it underway, So it's a little bit different. It's interesting difference to know about, but it's not anything that made my opinion of the movie or the book change any. The next part that happens, the next biggest thing, this is the only thing that happened that didn't happen that I was looking for. I remember when I was reading the book, there was a part right when they leave the Shire. It was where there was a character that was involved. Well, let me back up a little bit. Okay, so in the movies, all the hobbits, they leave the Shire and they travel along. And of course, they get to the point where they was like, this is the furthest I've ever been from the Shire after this one step or whatever line they choose. And I can't completely remember what happens next, but they think they have a little stint where they're running away from the wraiths. And they're hiding under trees and all of that kind of stuff. And then eventually they get to the town where they're supposed to be meeting Strider, who is Aragorn. So there's a big section between that point that happens in the books that gets this completely removed from the movies altogether. In the books, once they leave the Shire and they start traveling along and they going through wherever they need to go to, trying to get to that little town where they're supposed to meet Strider, they come to this dark forest. It's a weird, spooky forest. They come to this forest and they're like, we got to go through here. So they're traveling through this dark, spooky forest, and they get attacked by a living tree, sort of like the same thing as the Ents that you see later on in the later movies. They get attacked by one. This one is mean and aggressive. He's not like the ones that they meet later, Treebeard, and he's not like those. This one is mean and aggressive, and he's attacking them. And he somehow traps 2 of the hobbits. He attacks them and have them trapped in some area they can't get out, and he's still trying to get at them, but he got them trapped. At that point, they can't leave, or the living tree will get them. So the other 2 hobbits that weren't trapped, they leave. They go and try to find something that will help them, some kind of help, something. They try to leave just to try to get help to go back and rescue their first 2 hobbits that are trapped. Now, while they're traveling along and they're wandering around that forest, they run into this old man. The old man, he just shows up, just an old man with a beard and everything, and the old man singing songs and stuff like that. Man introduced himself as Tom Bombadil. Now, this whole section was completely removed from the movie. And it was one of those sections that in the book, I don't know how large it was, but I felt like it was a big part of that first book, So they meet Tom Bombadil, and it's like seemed like every page in the book, Tom Bombadil was singing a song. In my mind, I kind of looked at him as like an old bard, like an elder bard type character. they tell Tom about his problem, and he's like, come on, let's go. We'll handle this. So he goes and he finds where the living tree is still have the two hobbits trapped. And with one command, the tree just stops. It's like Tom Bombadil was really powerful. And it's like he had control over everything in that forest. So he just gives one command and the tree stops. The tree stops attacking the two hobbits. And not only that, but he even commands the tree to carry them to his house. The tree picks them up and walks through the forest and takes Tom Bombadil, Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin to Tom's house. And they spend a few days at his house, And while they're at his house, they find out a lot of information about him. They find out he's really powerful. They found out he's like what he calls himself, the master of that realm, that land, the forest. And he's just a really powerful person. And when they stay at his house for about a week, it seemed like they was there for a long time. It felt like a big part of that book was dealing with the hobbits and hanging out with Tom Bombadil and talking about the forest and his magic and singing songs every 5 minutes. When they left, they tried to get him to come with them to help because they figured, he's a powerful person. He would be useful, with what they got to do. But, his interests, he wasn't interested in anything beyond the forest, The forest was his realm. That's where he lived. That was what he had what his mastery was of everything in that forest. And he could care less about what went on. He didn't care nothing about the ring. The ring, in the books, everybody that got near the ring had like some kind of power over them, control over them. The ring made them want the ring, made them crave the ring. That's why it was so dangerous, Tom Bombadil, it didn't have the power. It didn't work on him. It didn't work on Tom Bombadil. He could care less about the ring. It didn't have no power over him. He even put the ring on and it didn't even make him turn invisible or anything. Like everybody else, it kind of like brought them into that little invisibility realm that they went in when they put it on. But it didn't have no power over him at all, So that's why they was thinking maybe he should come and help them. But, he just had no interest. He was like, no, this is your journey. You have to go and do it on your own. And that leads to another thing that changed from the books. In the movies, if you remember, once they met Aragorn and once they had the meeting at Rivendell and all of that stuff, Aragorn gives all the hobbits swords, elvish swords, and those are the swords that they had throughout the whole rest of the series, But in the books, Tom Bombadil actually gave them those swords before they left the forest. And they weren't elvish swords, they were some other kind of metal. I can't remember the name of it. Those swords were actually given to them by Tom Bombadil. I can't quite remember how they got it. I don't know if they went together and got those swords or there was just something that he had and he gave it to them to help them on their journey. In the books, it felt like every time they stopped somewhere, wherever they stopped, gave them another item that helped them later on in their journey, And with them, it was the sword. I want to take this time here to ask you to make sure you subscribe to the channel by clicking the like button and the subscribe button below if you like to hear more content about story-related topics. And make sure you click the bell also so you get notified when new videos are posted. All right, so Tom Bombadil, after that section in the book where the hobbits spend about a week with him and he saved them from the living tree creature and he gives them the swords to help them on their journey, he pretty much was gone from the rest of the book. You didn't hear from him or hear anything about him anymore other than the hobbits mentioning him. It seemed like he left an impression on the hobbits. So several times throughout the rest of the books, they brought him up a couple of times. They even brought him up to Elrond when they got to Rivendell. And Rivendell gave them a little bit more information. Elrond knew who he was. He said that he was from a very old time. So it seemed like he's been on this earth been on Middle Earth for years, well beyond, way back in history. He go way far back in Middle Earth history. And he also mentioned that he knew that he wasn't interested in helping with any of this ring stuff, said that he just had no desire to be involved with anything dealing with anything beyond his realm, beyond the forest. And that was that. You know, that was something when I was watching the movies, I kept thinking, I'm wondering how they're going to do Tom Bombadil. I wonder how they're going to do that part of the book, but it never happened because they just left it out completely. And it was easy. It was an easy thing to get left out because while in the books, it felt like it was a big part of the first book, Fellowship of the Ring. It really didn't have any bearing on the rest of the story. It was sort of like its own self-contained section that just built, you know, just something that happened along their journey, just another stop in their journey that really didn't have an effect on their overall journey. If I get anything wrong or I said something wrong or I said something out of place, make sure you let me know in the comments below. This is stuff that I'm trying to remember. I might have gotten some things different. And if I got some things wrong, and if I did, let me know in the comments below. All right, so another thing that was different, it wasn't a big deal, but it was something that I noticed. There's a scene in the movies, you remember, after they meet Strider and after they leave the town, the little town that they were in, you know, because of the Wraiths had, you know, infiltrated the town and they kind of tricked the Wraiths into attacking the wrong room and then they all get away. So they leave and they are at this area, like a little stone, like I'm not sure what it is, sort of like a monumental type area. And while they're there, Aragon, who was at that time they knew him as Strider, he was off doing something. I can't remember what it was, but they get attacked by the Ring Wraith and the Wraith King or the Night King or whatever his name was. But they get attacked by them, you know, and Frodo gets stabbed, you know. And Aragon shows up with his flames, waving them off, and he scares them away. And then he leaves, you know, try to get away with them, and the Ring Wraiths give chase through them through the woods, and it goes on where it seems like it went on for a long time because I think it was like dark when it started, and then next thing you know it was daytime. And then they meet up with Arwen, the elf, and she grabs Frodo and she holds him, and she's on the horse and she gallops away, you know, to get him to safety. And that was something that was different in the movies. In the book, there was actually another character that met up with the hobbits after Frodo got stabbed. It was a different elf met up. I can't remember his name, starts with a G. But there's a different elf that met up with them, and that elf was the one that led them to safety. And then the water horses that flushed all the Ring Wraiths away, that was something that was created with a combination of Elrond and Arwen. They put their magic together and they summoned the water horses to wash all of the Ring Wraiths away to help them escape. So they didn't actually meet Arwen until after they got to Rivendell. Didn't that's where they actually met her, you know. Someone else met them and led them to safety. And then now the last thing I'm going to bring up, this is something else that was that I remembered that was different from the books than it was in the movie. And I think it was more dramatic in the movie. It's something that grabbed me a little more in the movie. And that's when, you know, they have the meeting after they get to Rivendell, and they have the meeting and Elrond is talking, and then they decide to, for one thing in the movie, Gimli, the first thing he does is takes his hammer and tries to shatter the ring. You know, that never happens in the book. That's a movie thing. But it's something that I would think. I was like, why don't you just try to destroy it, you know, slam it or something? You know, and he tried it. I was thinking that, and he tried it, and it didn't work. But that was something that was a movie only thing. It didn't happen in the books. I keep bumping my tape when the camera's moving. In the movie, what happens is they have this big dramatic scene where they're looking for volunteers to carry the ring to Mordor, and all of the hobbits and Gimli and Legolas and everybody just stands up one by one and is like, you have my sword, you have my shield, you know. And it was like a big dramatic scene with the music building up and everything. In the books, it was kind of different. In the books, they decide they have to take the ring to Mordor, and Elrond, you know, he was kind of, you know, like the big dog. He's the leader in that area. He's the ruler of all of the elves, and in that situation, he's like the lead person. Elrond just basically assigned people to the Fellowship. You know, he just was like, you are going to you know, deliver the ring to Mordor. And it's not a big deal. I kind of like how it was in the movie better than I did in the books. In the movie, it was more dramatic. It made you feel more than in the books. In the books, it felt kind of like just another step in the journey, That's where I'm gonna stop at as far as the differences. There's a lot more, there's 3 whole movies and there's a lot more differences, but that's kind of like this to start. And I think the biggest one, the only one that's really worth talking about, was the absence of Tom Bombadil in the first movie. That's the biggest exclusion from the books that I feel. The only exclusion that I feel is even worth bringing up. The rest of them are just minor stuff that it's like nice that you noticed it. It's sort of more like an Easter egg than anything else. I don't think it have any bearing. Now, what did I enjoy more, the book or the movies? I have to say, I really enjoyed the books. I read it's 3 books, and when I bought it, I didn't read it like a lot of people read it when they were kids or whatever. I didn't read it until I was an adult. I was an adult for a while, and I bought it at Walmart, and luckily I ended up finding a book that had all 3 books in one. So it was just like one book that included all 3 of them. So I just bought that and I read all 3 of them. I think I read it while I was at work, over a course of period of time, of course, because it was 3 books. It was a good amount of reading. I remembered reading that book and I just remembered how vivid everything was. When I read it, it was like when I read the words on the page, it was easy for the images of what was going on to fill my mind. It was like when I saw the movie, all of the things that was in my mind that I had created myself just from reading it, it felt like it was completely translated to the screen. Like, I don't know, like as if Peter Jackson, I guess he was the one that would have came up with how everything looked and everything. I guess he kind of got the same interpretation from what he read that I got from what I read, because a lot of things that was on the screen was exactly like how I imagined it in my mind. The only thing I didn't imagine being the same is the elves. I was expecting the elves to be little, and I'm guessing that comes from video games. A lot of times in video games, role-playing games, the elves are smaller people. So, and I guess that was stuck in my mind when I was reading the book. So when I got to the elves in the books, I didn't realize in the movies they were tall, just like man and everything. It was no different. I mean, they had the ears and everything, but they were, they weren't little people. They were the same height as every other man or whatever creature that's in that world. Can I pick one over the other? I say the movies really stuck with me more. Like I said, that's probably my favorite movie series of all time is Lord of the Rings. I like it more than Star Wars. I like Star Wars, but I can't say I'm a crazy Star Wars fanatic. I do really, really like Star Wars, but Lord of the Rings is the movie that really touched me, that really hold a place as far as the movies that I enjoy the best. If I look at every movie I've watched in my whole life, and the Lord of the Rings series is number 1 on the list. Now that may change next year. My mood may be different and I may come up with something else, but consistently when I thought about it, Lord of the Rings is that movie for me. It's actually about time for me to watch it again. I haven't watched it in a while. So every once in a while I like to just take like a Saturday and watch all 3 movies back to back. Which you have to take a Saturday to do that because each one of those movies are well over 2 hours. And if you watch the director cut, is even longer. So, but there you have it. I'm going to do a series of these videos where I compare the on-screen property to the book property. It has to be something that I've read the book and seen the movie. It isn't like that with every movie that has a book based on it for me. Make sure you hit subscribe and hit the bell so you will know when I got new videos coming up, and you won't miss that one when it comes out. Till next time.